is no question that violence is testing the faith of people around the world. Our panel of religious leaders representing Christianity, Judaism, and Islam can help you begin to restore your beliefs through conversation. Led by Rabbi Jerome Gerling, each panelist will share his or her thoughts on respect and tolerance and how to engage the community around interfaith topics. We join the program already in progress.
More information or whatever the case may be. So, the first statement that I will read. On April 26, 1956, Rabbi Leo Beck, who is considered the International Dean of Reform and Progressive Rabbis, and perhaps even world Jewry, at the age of 93, gave his final address at a conference in Brussels on dialogue between Christians, Jews, and Muslims. The Nazis had granted Rabbi Beck safe passage out of Germany. His response, not until every Jew has been safely out of Germany. Rabbi Beck spent the war years in a concentration camp. Yet only 11 years after liberation, he is said to have set the cornerstone of interfaith dialogue as the knowledge and acceptance of the differences and similarities of religions. He said in order to understand the differences and similarities, one has to be aware of one's own religious identity. And so to our panel I ask, do you think religious leadership can or should examine its own identity, its strengths and its weaknesses, and admit to them so as to change the climate of violence in the name of religion and restore the now tarnished traditional values of respect and tolerance? It's all yours.
I guess we're going in the same order. I think one needs only to turn on the news or to turn on their computer and to listen to the conversation that's going on, particularly in this election year, to see that Rabbi Beck's statement and his words 60 years ago are just as relevant today and perhaps take on an even greater urgency. At the time he spoke, everybody's mind was still looking backwards to a decade, the discovery of the concentration camps and the death of 6 million Jews. Since then, there have been many more millions who have been killed in the name of God. The Muslims who were killed in Croatia, the Bosnian War, the whole Balkan conflict in the 90s, places in Africa, Asia, where people have been murdered, exterminated because somebody decided that their God told them to do that. And certainly in this nation, ever since 9/11, the focus on that. When we listen to the rhetoric today, it reminds us, I think, that when you take ignorance and you couple it with fear, it very easily turns into hate. And that's as true today as it's been since the beginning of time, which means that it is so very necessary, as Rabbi Beck said, to begin to know each other, to know our similarities and our differences, and also to know something about ourselves. We live in a changing world which asks us to re-examine our identity daily. Who are we really? Do we really live the things that we profess and say that we have? Education is essential in all of that, and yet education is not the be-all and end-all. And that's true for a couple of reasons. First of all, our loves and our hates, our affections and disaffections, the things we hope for, the things we fear, those decisions take place in a process in our beings that is so deep, the best way to describe it is that it transcends rationality and reason. Which means the fact of the matter is there are people who can be very well educated and be hateful bigots. That's reality. The other reason that education is not the be-all and end-all, although a very necessary part, is the fact that there's a big difference between knowing something about someone and knowing them. Faith, regardless of what faith we're talking about, is essentially a relationship. First of all, there is a relationship with that which is beyond ourselves, that which is ultimate, the thing we call God. There's also that notion of the relationship that we have with each other. And most of the great religions of the world understand that all things were created by a force, a being, and all things, especially all people, were created in the image and likeness of that Creator. It means that as close as we will ever get to God in this lifetime is in relationship with another person. And that third dimension of faith is the understanding of ourselves. Who are we? What were we created to be? Who are we to become in this life? And all the more reason that not only at this point in our history and our lives together do the great religions and all religions and people need to share with each other and to learn each other's similarities and differences and learn to not only tolerate but respect and honor one another. We also need to re-examine ourselves and to understand who we are and what we believe, because it'll help us reach that point where perhaps we see that we have followed too much our own devices and not the things that we were intended to be created for.
Before I talk about religion and what religion has to do with intolerance or tolerance or what have you, I would like to talk about 4 different things. I want to talk about fire, patriotism, wine, and love. Fire has 2 dimensions. Fire can light the night and bring us warmth, and fire allows us to cook things and does all kinds of good things, therefore fire is terrific. On the other hand, fire can burn a person, and fire can destroy a home or a whole town. Fire is very important, but if you think about it, it's important in 2 ways, both for what it does for the good and how dangerous fire can also be. So you can say the same thing about patriotism. Patriotism is a good thing. It builds pride and solidarity and civic action and sacrifice. So patriotism is a very good thing. Then again, patriotism can turn into arrogance and intolerance and xenophobia. So patriotism is dangerous, although it's also a good thing. How about wine? Same thing. Wine can elevate us, and wine can make a meal a wonderful experience, and wine can be refined in 1,000 ways. So wine is a wonder. On the other hand, too much wine, or the wrong use of wine, is dangerous and leads to drunkenness and all kinds of other things. And then lastly, love. Love is sweet and uplifting and nourishing, and it fills a gap in the soul. On the other hand, there's something like, remember the movie Fatal Attraction? Love of a certain sort is needy, and it can be possessive, and love can lead to jealousy, and love, ironically, can lead to hate. And religion is the same as all of those 4. Religion does great things, all religions. whether it's Buddhism or Hinduism or Judaism, Islam, or Christianity, religion has great capacity to organize our lives, to tell us where we've come from, where we're going, and to give us a sense of how we're supposed to journey through life. Holidays through the cycle of the year, life cycle events from birth to marriage to death, whatever. So religion is a great, great force for the good, absolutely, in the human experience. On the other hand, I think religion is just like fire, patriotism, wine, and love. Religion is both positive and like fire, religion can burn us, and like patriotism, religion can make us hate others, and like wine, we can get drunk on faith, and like love, our love of our religion can turn into hate towards others. It's as if you've got religion, you're in good shape. I almost suspect if you have too much religion, that's when you or I become just a bit dangerous. And that's because religion is based, in some sense, on a feeling that you are connected with the ultimate, with the divine, with something absolute. So if you believe without doubt that you have truth, if you believe that you have a handle to the divine, then your personal religious faith can morph into something very dangerous. As patriotism becomes dangerous, religion can become intolerant. And that, I think, is the conundrum. That's the real challenge with regard to religion. It's a wonder, but it's also a danger. And what we witness in many parts of the world is that those who are too certain that they have the truth too close to their hearts and souls, I think those religious advocates become dangerous people. In fact, they kind of lose whatever it was about the religion that was beautiful and edifying to begin with. Jews who believe too much and too strongly can become intolerant. Muslims who believe too much can become intolerant. Christians who believe too much can become intolerant. I almost like to think, I actually do believe, Judaism is better than Jews. And Islam is better than Muslims. And Christianity is better than Christians. The problem is us, not the religions. We're just not as good, and we muck it up, sort of because of a variety of issues that are personal to us, and also I think because religion has this unique connection to truth, capital T, and when you start talking about that, you get yourself in danger. Now I have some other things to say about Judaism, but I might have talked enough for now. What does Judaism itself have to say about tolerance? But maybe I'll hold those for effort. Don't go ahead. You sure?
I'll give you my time.
Okay. So what does, not what the Jews do, but what does Judaism say about tolerance? I'll say just three things about Judaism and tolerance. One of my favorite, notwithstanding what I just said about how dangerous I think religion can become, what does Judaism in theory say regarding other religions and other faiths and other ways of living a life? I think the most important text comes out of a book some 2,000 years old. The idea is repeated in a number of places in Jewish sources, and that is that the righteous of all nations have a share in the world to come. So that comes out of a 2,000-year-old volume. Pretty interesting that anybody 2,000 years ago would have been willing to say that. But you find this text coming up again and again and again. It's a fundamental Jewish belief that goes as follows. The righteous of all nations have a share in the world to come. And Jews were able to say that, Judaism professes that, because among the things that distinguish Judaism, there's no sense that Jews have the truth or the only way to eternal reward. So pulsing somewhere in Judaism is always this sense that everybody who behaves in a righteous fashion has a share in the world to come. In other words, everybody who's good is good, and that's good enough. Second point, there are passages in the book of Deuteronomy in which we're told that a biblical people, two of them, people out of the nation of Ammon, which is to the east of Israel, and Moab, which is to the east of Israel, kind of in the area where modern Jordan is. So there are passages in the book of Deuteronomy which say, no Israelite shall ever marry, nor shall we ever allow into the congregation of Israel descendants of either Ammon or Moab forever. It says to the 10th generation, but that essentially means forever. So you couldn't find a more misanthropic statement of that. We will never deal with anyone who descends from Ammon or Moab. They're written off. That's the book of Deuteronomy. So if you thumb through the rest of the Bible, you come to a book by the name of Ruth. The book of Ruth, which tells the story of a woman, Ruth, who's born in Moab, comes to the land of Israel, marries a Jewish man by the name of Boaz, and Ruth, this Moabite, who we're told in the Torah, never entered the congregation of Israel. She marries a Jew. She and Boaz have a son whose name is, I'm forgetting the actual name now. There's one more, yeah. They have one son, I think his name is Perez. He has a son by the name of Jesse. He has a son by the name of David, who becomes King David. And in Jewish tradition, it's King David who becomes the progenitor of the Messiah. So there you have in the Bible, in the Hebrew Bible, this amazing development. On the one hand, it starts out by saying, we'll never have anything to do with these Moabites. They're worse than dirt. And yet there's a book in which a Moabite becomes the great-great-grandmother of the Messiah. So on the one hand, total rejection. On the other hand, acceptance, absolute acceptance of how beautiful even a Moabite and what a Moabite can do for the Jewish people. And I'll just stop with those two examples of the way in which Judaism straddles this issue regarding intolerance, acceptance, and more to say about it later.
You see what I would English. Let me take a slightly different approach and look at it through the lens of the experience of Roman Catholicism in particular. Christianity and Judaism, I want to make a few observations first about Jewish-Christian relations and then a few observations about Muslim-Christian relations. Christianity and Judaism have a very difficult history. All through eras, there has been an attitude of superiority characterized by a doctrine that comes to be known as supersessionism, that Christianity actually replaced Judaism and Judaism is no longer viable. That's not going to lead to a good relationship. So if we look at the history of that, then one of the things that we see is that it really came to a head in the experience of the Holocaust during World War II. So I would like to just look a little bit at moving from that time forward, because that experience was so profound that it became a catalyst for many people to say, we really do need to go back and look at what our historic relationship has been, because it has been so troubled and it has led to one of the most shocking things we have experienced perhaps in history. So when I read the quote from Rabbi Wnec, I started thinking and looking and going back over a number of processes and discovered that in a very interesting way, a document that called the Roman Catholic Church to rethink its whole attitude towards Judaism has an organic connection with Rabbi Wnec. Rabbi Leo, in his experience, eventually came to interact with numerous rescuers, people who had sheltered Jews during the war. And it was through a process where there was a working group of Christian scholars called the Apeldoorn Working Group. And what they were doing is they were meeting to discuss the nature of Jewish-Christian relations in the 1950s. This particular group began to sense that there was a need to reassess. And one of the interesting pieces from the quote that Rabbi Berlin presented us was that religious leaders and religious communities need to go back and relook at their identity. And I think that's what triggered this thought process for me. And so it was the interaction between the rescuers and icons of the Jewish community like Rabbi Wnec that led to this process of reassessment. What happened internally from a Catholic perspective is that key leaders of the Roman Catholic Church, Monsignor John Osterreicher, Cardinal Johannes Willebrands, began to see that there was an important need to move in the direction of looking for a whole new approach. That led to further discussions. Also, another voice that should be mentioned is Jules Itzhak, Jewish historian. And what happened was they began to sense that it was time for the Roman Catholic Church to officially take a look at its relationship with Judaism. And so in the 1950s, all this discussion is going on. And when a new pope is elected in 1958, he is presented with, first of all, his own perceptions, but also the experience of all of these people, both Jewish and Christian, and he is encouraged to include a discussion of the relationship between the Roman Catholic Church and the Jewish community as part of a very significant event known as the Second Vatican Council, which began in 1962 and ended in 1965. At the very end of that process, it was a lengthy and complex discussion that took place. But by 1965, they had crafted a document that opened up a whole new set of perspectives on how Roman Catholics and Jews should be working with each other and dealing with each other. And many of the attitudes, I spoke, for example, of the earlier perspective of supersessionism, that Christianity replaced Judaism and Judaism is no longer viable. That kind of thinking was specifically addressed and rejected. And so when the document is published in 1965, it creates an enormous amount of activity and also an enormous amount of consternation because many people didn't understand exactly what was going on. So that document today is known as Nostra Aetate. It's been around since 1965 and has been a pathway to improved relationships and ongoing dialogue between the Roman Catholic Church and the Jewish community. And I'm absolutely sure that Rabbi Wnec, in his conversations with rescuers and with other people who then had conversations with Cardinal Willebrands and Monsignor Osterreicher, that his input and his reflection and his experience profoundly affected the outcome of this document and moved things in a very different direction. Now, I don't want to turn this into a history lesson, so I'll avoid that. But this just really paved the way to a new way of looking at things, but there are some cautions here. First of all, this happened at a very high level within the church. This happens at the level of the Vatican, the international community. And it has been much harder for the teachings of Nostra Aetate to filter down to the various parish churches that we would bump into in Western Massachusetts. And so while there are many people who are aware of the need to engage in dialogue, respect, and tolerance, there are also still many people who hang on to some of the ideas that were officially repudiated in 1965. So it's a very interesting phenomenon. What I would say is simultaneously, you see an enormously different attitude between Christians and Jews at the official level. But you also sometimes see exactly the same attitudes that were present before 1965 amongst what I guess you ordinary folk. And so it's a process that we need to continue and develop further. Just a few thoughts with regard to Islamic-Christian dialogue. Certainly, again, Christianity and Islam has had a complex history. There have been moments of tolerance and moments where there has been active collaboration, but there have been many moments of misunderstanding and many moments of outright aggression. So I wanted to point to just a number of processes that have emerged within the past 20 years. And also to point out that while Nostra Aetate, the document that came out in 1965, focused extensively on the relationship between Christians and Jews, it also focused on the relationship between Roman Catholics and Muslims. It also includes Buddhists and Hindus as well, but we don't need to look at that today. So there certainly has been an enormous amount of movement. And quite recently, Archbishop Blaise Cupid announced the beginning of a national Catholic-Muslim dialogue that is being targeted regionally. So in the United States, Dr. Bosch and I were just talking about it, there are at least 4 regional dialogues where there are formal gatherings of representatives of the Catholic community and representatives of the Islamic community to further dialogue in the interest of creating cooperation and tolerance, but even beyond tolerance, respect for each other. I also spent a little bit of time looking at just a sample country. And in Lebanon, there's certainly, just geographically, the situation is that there is going to be a lot of interreligious reactions. And it's interesting to see that there has been ongoing Lebanese Muslim-Christian dialogue since the 1950s. So again, movement in the direction of trying to work with each other, to collaborate with each other, to deepen our understanding, to get rid of negative attitudes, negative stereotypes, and to reassess who we are. There are a number of interesting ongoing dialogues there. I refer to one specifically that is contemporary in Lebanon, the Arab Working Group for Muslim-Christian Dialogue. Just a brief quote from their statement of purpose. They believe that peaceful coexistence is achievable, viable, and necessary.